Okay, I can't remember if I said at the beginning of chapter 16 lecture that that was going to be the final lecture. But if I did, I lied because chapter 17 on social psychology is going to be the final lecture. So this is the final chapter of the book, I do believe, and this is going to be the final lecture then for this class and for this chapter then. Okay, so chapter 17, social psychology. This is a really fun and interesting chapter. Students usually really like this chapter. It is definitely applicable to your everyday life because we are social beings, right? We like being around other individuals. We are social animals, so to speak. A lot of good, interesting research was done that we'll talk about in this chapter. Research that would not be probably allowed today because it is considered unethical. But back before, I won't really say before we cared about ethics, because I think we've kind of always cared about ethics, but I don't think it was at the top of our radar the way it is today. But we got a lot of really good research done because we got really true feelings and actions and behaviors without worrying too much about how it affected the individuals. Today, we are much more in tune with that, and a lot of that research would not be allowed to be done today. Okay, with that being said, let's start off with this chapter. The first thing I want to do is just give a basic definition for social psychology. It is the scientific study. Again, it is a science. Research is done, statistics are done. So it is a scientific study of how people's thoughts, feelings, and actions are affected by other people. You can do social psychology with animals also, but this is more so looking at thoughts, feelings, and actions that are affected by others. The first module in this chapter is module 52, Attitudes and Social Cognition. And there are 3 questions that we are going to answer in this chapter. The first question, what are attitudes and how are they formed? How are attitudes maintained? And how are attitudes changed? The second question we're going to answer is how do people form impressions of what others like, or of what others are like, excuse me, and of the causes of their behaviors. So you see someone else doing something, and how is it that you form an impression of that other person based on what they are doing? And then the third question is, what are the biases that influence the ways in which people view others' behavior? Because sometimes we are more biased towards others' behaviors and not so biased towards our own. Or, depending on the situation, perhaps you are more biased toward your own behavior and not as biased towards others. This will all make sense later on in the chapter then too. All right, the first thing I want to talk about is persuasion and changing attitudes. Let's give a basic definition for this word attitude. It's an evaluation of people, objects, ideas, and behavior. Attitudes are the evaluations of people, objects, ideas, and behavior. And the ease at which we can change someone's attitude depends on 3 different sources. It depends on the source of the message. It depends on the characteristics of the message. And it depends on the characteristics of the target. So there are 3 different things we're looking at. Who is giving the message? What is the message about? And who is the message intended for? Those are the 3 different things that you have to take into account when you're trying to change someone's attitude, or if someone is trying to change your attitude, they need to take these three different things into account: the message source, the characteristics of the message, and the characteristics of the target. The person who is delivering that persuasive message, that person who's trying to change your attitude, they are sometimes referred to as the attitude communicator. They are sometimes referred to as the attitude communicator. The next thing is this link between attitudes and behavior. Now remember, we said the definition for attitude was your evaluation of people, objects, ideas, and behavior. So we now want to look at the link, the relationship between attitudes and behavior. And one of the important concepts that we talk about when we're talking about trying to change someone's attitude or change someone's belief or change someone's idea or change someone's action, right? One of the concepts we have that we discuss in psychology and we do research on is, well, first of all, attitudes influence behavior and behavior shapes attitudes. There is this link between the two. But that concept I was talking about is what is called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance, it says first that it's a mental conflict, right? And that makes sense just from those two words, cognitive dissonance. Cognitive is the mental aspect, dissonance is the conflict. You know, those first four letters, dis. Dis means going against. So cognitive dissonance is the mental conflict that occurs when a person holds two contradictory thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes. So you're saying one thing, but you're doing something else. Okay? You believe one way, but your actions are not supporting that. So there is that mental conflict between the contradictory thought, belief, and attitude. So for example, for someone who smokes, right? Yet they know that in a lot of cases, more so than not, smoking can lead to lung cancer. So you know that you shouldn't smoke because it can lead to lung cancer and that it's unhealthy for you, yet you still smoke. So see where you have this mental conflict? I smoke, but I know it's unhealthy for me. So in order to deal with this mental conflict, in order to deal with this cognitive dissonance, you either have to change your thoughts or change your actions. Okay? So there are four ways that we have to reduce the dissonance. Four ways that we have to reduce the dissonance. One way is to modify one or both of the cognitions. So stop smoking or stop thinking that it's going to lead to lung cancer. Okay? It's really hard to stop both of those. It's easier to either stop smoking because you know it's going to lead to lung cancer, or keep smoking and believe that it's not going to lead to lung cancer. It would be really hard to do both of those, but that's one of your options to reduce dissonance. Modify one or both of the cognitions. You can also change the perceived importance of one of the cognitions. I have on the next slide an example of how you go through this, but you can change the perceived importance of one of the cognitions. 3, you can add a completely separate cognition. You can add a completely separate or new cognition. And 4, you can deny that the two cognitions are actually related to each other. So you have this mental conflict that you don't like, right? It doesn't feel good to say one thing and do something separate. And so you want to reduce that mental conflict. You want to reduce that dissonance. And one of these 4 ways is the way that you can do that. So in figure 3, you can see, this is cognitive dissonance. It says at the very bottom, it's the simultaneous presence of 2 contradictory cognitions. I smoke and smoking leads to cancer. This leads to dissonance, which can be reduced through several methods. Okay? So you have this dissonance, and here are our 4 ways to reduce that dissonance along the bottom. So the first one is modifying one or both cognitions. I really don't smoke too much, right? So that's reducing one of those. I do smoke, and I know it leads to cancer, but I'm going to modify one, right? I don't smoke that much, though. I only am a social smoker, or I only have cigarettes whenever I'm stressed out, or I only have 1 or 2 a day, things like that. The second way, right, changing the perceived importance of the cognition, you may say the evidence is weak that smoking causes cancer. The third one, you're adding additional cognitions. You may say, I exercise so much that it doesn't really matter that I smoke. I know smoking's bad for me, but I exercise a lot and I'm really healthy. So it's not going to be as bad as for me as it would be for someone else. And then the third one is denying that cognitions are related. There is no evidence linking smoking and cancer. Now, you see with all of those, right, that we just talked about, in none of those did it say that you're going to quit smoking. You're instead changing your mental cognition. It is so difficult to change your action that instead it's much easier that you want to change your beliefs than it would be for you to change your actions. And we are very good at doing that, right? We can talk ourselves into or out of anything. And that's what we do a lot of times in order to deal with that type of dissonance.